My name is Joe Edwardson. I served in the Army, January 1943 and January 1946. Basic training was basically a revelation for most of us. We had just left home, and it was quite an experience just to leave home and join the Army. Basic training was, it was intriguing in a way, a lot of curiosity involved, and your companions, you get them, there's always an interest where you're from and what are you doing and where you are, and so it went by rather quickly. So actually should have been longer, but I was only just a little bit under 3 months training. So then went overseas. I went overseas as a reinforcement because I was still pretty young when the war started, still in school actually. So after basic training, they gave us a leave and went back to Kingston. 2 days later, boarded a train down to Halifax, got on board a ship at the Andes. It originally carried 500 people, I think it was about 5,000 soldiers. Got on board a ship and landed up in England. Yeah, and then I landed up in a place called Godalming. Godalming, that's where it was. And it was what they call a holding unit. So from there they distributed us to enforcements, and I wound up in the Regina Rifles. And that's where I served in the war. That's where I was. From there we started to train for D-Day. And we trained and we trained and then we trained some more. But by the time that we were ready, it was about 2 years later, I guess. Before the invasion, that's what we did basically, was train for the invasion. Our entire division, actually, was the 3rd Canadian Division, destined from the start to be the shock troops for Canada, if you will. It was a pretty young division, quite a few young guys. While you're in training, we had lots of opportunities to question what we're doing and where we're going and when's the event going to happen. Almost every weekend you're out on training someplace, moving. We used to call it the sausage machine. Every weekend you're out doing something, going somewhere, training something, or messing up somebody's fields, or things like that. Actually, the whole company was destined for this particular beach area, and that's where we landed. Well, to begin with, we couldn't get ashore because they hadn't expected the waves to be as high as what they were. We were actually supposed to land the day before, but we didn't because of the weather. On June the 6th was the destined day. And the night before that, we were on board ship where everybody was talking and having a good time and wondering what was going to happen. But anyway, we soon found out. Loaded the assault boats and went in on the assault boats. Were built so that the front ramp fell down and everybody ran off to get out of there as fast as you could. Used to clear hours in about 10 seconds. So anyway, we got to the beach and they couldn't land close enough. The ocean was rough, and the Germans had these, what they call Alman seas in the water, and the waves would pick these assault crafts up and dash them against the fortifications there and blowing them up. So they didn't want to take a chance on going back in. So we disembarked in the water and headed for the shore. We're about 30 feet away, and I come off the end of that ramp and I went straight down. Somebody grabbed, there was a guy on each side of me, we grabbed ourselves up and started heading for the beach. And somebody said, "What are you doing down there anyway?" There was still a sense of humor. So anyway, we got on the beach, and that's when all hell broke loose. Our job was designed to get off the beach and get inland. So we got in behind the embankment, and we waited there until we gathered all our platoon, and then we started out. We went avoid the action, and we headed for inland. We got 3 miles inland the first day. which was nobody there. But there are a lot of people the next day. There's some things I won't repeat because even yet today. Second day wasn't too eventful. It was the third day when the Germans put in their counterattack. That was a very busy day. They had these little SS troopers. They were very, very, very good soldiers, very determined. Of course, we were just as determined, so it turned out into a pretty good fight. We got out of that, and then we were there for a place called Bretteville-Toulouse, I guess it was. And we were stationed in there for 3 days waiting to what was going to happen next, if they're going to attack or whatever we're going to do. Back then, all the farmers were little communities, but there were 2 great big kegs in there with about 500 liters of cider. And we were there for 4 days, and when we left, they were both empty. It was very low in alcohol. You couldn't drink enough to get drunk on. Oh, Calvados, that was a different story. That almost 90% alcohol. Stayed away from that. Burn your stomach out. They make it out of little green apples. They had orchards all over the place in Normandy with these little green apples. We used to eat them, but they weren't all that flavorful. Then from on the war, when we started advancing and the casualties started coming, and it was war, I guess, that finally broke out of the bridgehead, and we started advancing across France, and that was a lot of walking and tiring and a lot of long nights, little battles here and there against the Germans fighting rear guard and stuff like that, but basically it was kind of quiet. But then we hit Caen, and man, that was something else. We were in a position that we were going to attack the following day. That evening, I guess it started in the evening, they sent in the bombers to bomb Caen. And I sat in a tree, and I watched them bombing Caen. And it went on and on and on and on. I think they hit it with something like 500 bombers or something or other. Flattened it completely. There's rubble all over the place. The Germans were hiding behind the damn piles of rubble, and you'd come up one side and they'd come up the other. Of course, when the fighting really gets heavy, you see there's a guy today and tomorrow he's not there, but under normal circumstances, you form a camaraderie, and life gets, well, I would say, for want of a better word, it becomes routine, like everything else, It's a job. We got $43 a month. We got $43 a day once a month. And half of that was deferred, had to go home. As soon as you're dismissed on payday, the card game started. Usually the room 4 or 5 guys wind up with all the money. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of things I could say. I could keep you here all day probably, but we had some laughs, we had some bad times, and a lot of little incidents that you forget, I mean, it's been quite a while, but I would say 18 months training in the services wouldn't hurt anybody. It's a good discipline. Yes, I think a military is a good place to be, if you got the right people, of course.